So I'm going to say out loud to the folks in the audience that we are running this webinar differently than we usually do. And so we're recording it as if it's a podcast. And so I'm going to start off with my podcast introduction, and then we're going to have a conversation, and our folks in the audience will be able to ask some questions using the chat feature or the Q&A feature, maybe. Yeah, the Q&A feature's there, and we'll get started.
All right.
Welcome to Grad Chats with Dr. B. I'm your host, Dr. B, and today's chat is what I'll call a super chat. What makes it super? Well, not only do I have a wonderful guest, but we are also using this conversation as part of our Bear Scholars webinar series, which means we have folks in the audience with us, which is really cool. So let's meet my guest, Ty Hollowell. Ty is the Assistant Director for Transition in the Center for New Student, Parent, and Family Engagement at the University of Florida. Thank you, Ty, for joining me in this episode of Grad Chats with Dr. B.
Of course, I am so happy to be here. I literally am so elated. I know that we had tried to do this last semester. It didn't really work out. And so I'm really appreciative that we were able to reschedule and make it happen for this spring.
Yes, and I appreciate your patience with us as we went through those scheduling woes, I'll call it.
It happens. And we
does.
work in a higher education. We just kind of go with the flow.
Absolutely. So let's start by learning a little bit about you. So if you will, tell us a little bit about who you are outside of work, your background, and definitely include how you're connected to UCA.
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everyone. My name is Ty Hollowell. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am so happy to be here with you all. I identify as a Black male. I am a part of the LGBTQIA community, or the LGBT mafia, some people like to jokingly. I'm so here for it. I love being queer. I grew up in the South originally, so I was born in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, raised in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and until 8th grade, I moved to Texarkana, Texas, where I kind of finished doing like my adulting and growing up, I guess you could say. I am connected to UCA by the fact that I decided to go there for undergrad, and so I majored in public relations with a minor in communication, and I was there from 2013 to 2017. From there, I went on to grad school at Texas Tech University, and then kind of just navigated between different jobs and kind of ended up here at UF. But outside of work and things like that, I am a yogi. So I love being active in the yoga studio and also outside. So doing acro yoga and things like that. I'm very active. I love to run and do all those things. Hiking, of course, being originally from Arkansas, I'm a big fan of being outdoors. And I love to swim. Like I love being in water. So like those are some fun things about me.
Well, then you're in the right place, right down there in Gainesville, Florida, right?
I sure am. Although, like, I will say, I don't go swimming as often because alligators are a very real deal here. So, like, I'm very particular about which bodies of water I choose to go dip my toes in and things like that. But, like, it is so nice having beaches within literally an hour and a half of either direction that I choose to go. So I really enjoy that.
So what exactly do you do as the Assistant Director for Transition at the University of Florida? Like, that's a mouthful. So what does that mean, really? What do you do?
It is a mouthful. So in short, I oversee two big programs. And so the first being New Student Convocation. So all of our students are required to attend New Student Convocation as their like initial welcoming and onboarding to the university in this academic component. So I partner with all of our academic colleges, and they have individual onboarding and like orientations that they hold. But then after that, they all have to come into our big gymnasium where we host everyone in our O'Connell Center, which is where graduation is held, things like that. We do the whole pomp and circumstance. And it's like graduation backwards. It's like what I describe it to individuals. And so that is a large responsibility that I have. And then the other component of that is our first year seminar course called First Year Florida. And I love this because it's basically introducing incoming students across all different demographics and backgrounds to what life at UF is like, as well as connecting them to the greater Gainesville community. And so I oversee that going from fall, spring, and summer sections where I work with co-instructors who are faculty and or staff, And I have about 52 undergraduate student leaders who co-teach these courses with these co-instructors. And for about classes, 52 sections in the fall, about 15 sections in the summer, and 8 sections in the spring for 25 students each enrollment class size. And so it is pretty great. It's not mandatory. So that's what I really love about it, is that it's more so like an opt-in for the students who want to take it. And then we have based sections. And so we have Black and Brown identifying sections. We have some that are related to their academic college and majors. We have first gen specific, out of state or Gator specific, LGBTQIA specific. And so it's just really amazing that we get to include a lot of different student demographics in this. And so those are the two things I do with my role as the assistant director for transition at UF.
What would you say is the big difference between the Florida experience, because I think that's the phrase you use, the Florida experience, versus like the UCA experience that you experienced here?
Oh gosh, that's so hard because I loved my UCA experience. It's like weird thinking back to 2013, but like I would say the big difference is like obviously the incoming class size is like exponentially huge and diverse in that sense. But I think so the intentionality, like it's very easy to get lost in the numbers here. And so what I appreciate about First Year Florida is that our students that are teaching look like the students that are enrolled in their class. Similarly to our instructors that are teaching the class look like our students as well. And so a lot of our instructors do come from first gen backgrounds, or they do understand what it's like to have to work through college and understand financial money management and things of that sort. And I think especially the component where we do is making sure that not only are they getting connected to UF, but how are they getting connected to the greater Gainesville community? That is a really big proponent for us because a lot of our students come from Florida. We don't have a huge out-of-state population because I feel like the name UF speaks for itself when it comes to our students that are here. But it's like, oh, okay, yes, you go to UF, but do you know that we have rock climbing if you want to get involved in Gainesville? Or do you know that we have a depot park where they have a lot of food trucks and active engagement with ultimate frisbee teams and things of that sort? Or are you aware of how you can get back to the community and doing after school programming with the local elementary schools and things like that? And so we're very integral and intentional about making sure that our students know about the resources of getting involved so that they feel not just like a number, but really a part of the Gainesville community by way of being a part of the UF community.
Nice. Well, you mentioned, like, you talk about it in terms of being connected, which makes me think of networking, which is our actual topic tonight. So we're talking about, we've got like our graduate student audience, and this is actually a topic that our student advisory council, the graduate student advisory council, brought up in the fall that they really wanted to learn more about. So here we are, our topic is networking. So when you hear the word networking, like what comes to mind for you?
That's such a good one. I think for me, I think about it's about who you know and not always what you know. I think oftentimes we think of that as like, oh, well, that seems kind of shady, or like that's a little bit weird. He just founded that. And like, for me, it truly is about connections. I am a people person and I am good with people, but sometimes I know that like my energy can be drained by people at the same time. And so like understanding what that balance is and things like that, and like being in tune with yourself. But like networking is so fun for me. So like whenever I'm going to professional work conferences, I feel so overjoyed and like my cup is full because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I just met a colleague that they went to grad school back in like 94. And like, that's really exciting because even though that was a very different time period and that's when I was born, it's like they still are a UCA bear and like I'm a UCA bear. So we have a lot of commonalities that we can still talk about, and like that is really exciting. Or I meet someone else who went to my grad program, or they know someone else who I may know. And so connections built upon connections oftentimes are open doorways and lead to new opportunities that you never would have gotten if you didn't just open your mouth and be like, yo, it's so nice to meet you. My name is Ty. Tell me a little bit about yourself. So that's what I think about when it comes to networking.
Ty, as you talk about it, here's what I'm thinking. Like you seem like a natural at that. Like to just walk in, see a stranger and start talking to people. I'm going to be honest. I am not that person. Like when I'm in a room, what I do is I find somebody I know and we're going to stand right here. And anybody that wants to talk to me can come over here and talk to me. Like I just really, if I'm out networking, I have to purposefully make the effort to go out and talk with people. And so like while you're probably very natural at it, there are some of us that like it is terrifying.
Yeah.
It's not terrifying maybe, but it's definitely outside of our comfort zone. And so we have to be really purposeful about that networking aspect.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to respond to that, but that's just what was rolling through my head as you were talking.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so crazy because while I am a natural at it, it's like I've definitely had to realize that other people are not. And I have a personality, I come on really strong. The self-awareness, I got that. Like I get it.
Uh-huh.
And so even though I am excited whenever I meet people, sometimes I have to change my approach because, like, say if I'm meeting you at a conference and like I know your name, I'm like, oh my gosh, I know that she works at UCA. I still want to be respectful and not off-putting to you. So I may come up to
Uh-huh.
you and be like, oh my gosh, are you Dr. Angela? Like, I'm Ty. Like, so like I may change my mannerisms a little bit, or I may
Uh-huh.
be mindful of my tone of voice so that I'm not like startling you with my excitement. And so that is something that I am very mindful of. And even still, like whenever I take students to conferences or things of that sort, and how we talk about how do we engage with people that we want to make an impact or introduction with, but we're unsure of how to do so. I
Mhm.
always tell them it's like, the worst thing that someone can tell you is like, no, not interested, or I don't have the time right now, right? And so
Right.
you will never know if you don't just go up to them and make an introduction. And
Uh-huh.
oftentimes I found that it works in my favor. Have there
Mhm.
been moments where someone has shut me down? Absolutely. And I'm like, that's okay. Like,
Right.
like I am not for
Life goes on.
everyone. Yeah, like I'm not for everyone, and I get that. But I do think that there's power in stepping outside of your comfort zone because you're
Mhm.
never aware of what could happen. And I don't like to leave situations thinking, what if? Like
Yeah.
that, I've done
Yeah.
that several times, and it's never really feeling because I'm just like, what if Dr. Angela had been like, oh my gosh, like I wish I have gotten to talk to him more, or like I
Mhm.
had this really incredible opportunity that we did some research together, or have a colleague who is interested in this research, that would have been a really great connection point. And so I just always like to tell people is like, you never know, so why not just take the chance anyway?
Yeah. So when you think about your path towards your position, right? So you're in this position at the University of Florida. You've got all this really cool things going on. You've got the opportunity to make a huge impact on those incoming students and so forth. What role did networking play as you navigated your way towards that position?
Oh, that's such a good question. Let me take you back. So, when I was in undergrad, because I feel like this is important to share because I didn't know that I wanted to go into higher ed, first off. Like, I
Okay.
didn't know the field. Like, I feel like many people who work in higher education are kind of like, oh, like, I just happen to be a very involved student leader, this, that, and the other. I was Mr. UCA, like, for the UCA
Oh.
award, all this stuff. So, I was very
Uh-huh.
involved, ambassador, I was Greek, I was in the band. I was a resident assistant. Like I did all the things. And I had one of my hall directors, I was a resident assistant in Hughes Hall and Short Denny Hall. And when I was in Hughes Hall, one of my hall directors said, hey, did you know that this is a field that you actually go into? And I was
Mhm.
like what? And he was like, this, higher education. Like you can
Uh,
do this. You're a really good RA and you can be a hall director like I am. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So he graduated my junior year. I transferred halls to Short Denny, but he stayed in touch with me.
Uh-huh.
And that was the first spark of like the importance of communications and like just keeping up with people, is just being like,
Yeah.
hey, if you value a connection, just because distance is a factor doesn't mean that you don't stop checking in with people and making sure that they're good, right? And
Mhm.
so he kept following up with me, and fall semester came and he was like, hey, have you been looking at grad schools? What are you thinking? And I was like, yes, no, kind of, sort of. And so he knew someone that had graduated from the SPHE program at UCA who was working at Texas Tech. He put me in
Mhm.
contact with them, and they were like, I know you're really passionate about social justice issues. We have an assistantship here at Texas Tech that I think you'd be really great for. And so I reached out and applied. And before you know it, I was flying out to West Texas and Lubbock for
Uh-huh.
on campus interview. And I was like, what in the world? Like, I had never even heard of Lubbock, Texas,
Uh-huh.
which is crazy because, again, like I went to high school and middle school in Texas, but it was just not one of the schools that was on my radar. It was always like UT and Texas A&M. And so I had a phenomenal time. They offered me a position. I took it. And so from there, over the course of those first year and then my second year, I heard people talk about this institution called Berea College. And I was like, oh, like this seems really cool. Unbeknownst to me, I applied to a position to work at Berea College. And whenever I was doing my on the phone interview, one of them name dropped some people and they were like, do you know these people? And I was like, oh, I literally work with these people right now at Texas Tech.
Wow,
and they were like, oh my gosh, that's so great. And so I was like, okay, here we go. Connections are starting to happen. And so bills and connections were forming. I ended up leaving my grad school program early to go work full time at this institution in Kentucky. And I was there for 2 years. And then the pandemic happened, and I'm not even going to expound because the pandemic just be doing what the pandemic does. And so I was like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I guess I'm job searching. And so what happened was my first year at Berea, I went to an orientation conference because, again, higher ed, a lot of conferencing is where you get your networking done, you get to be refilled, and refreshed, and do some presentations, things like that. And so I did this pre-arrival for this orientation conference, and I met some incredible people that happened to work at UF. And during my second year at Berea, they posted in our group meeting, it was like, hey, we have a job opportunity. And I was like, let me apply. Let me see what's up. So I was like, okay, we good. And so I applied. And I remember feeling very nervous because I was like, I literally only know 2 people at this institution. This is a big jump for me, where I was working at an institution that was a small private school, 1,600 students, whereas UF is like 50 plus thousands. I was just like, what in the world? But I believed in my abilities. And so I like reached out to them and I was like, hey, I'm going to apply. And do you think you can give me any pointers and things like that? And they were like, just be yourself and like be confident in who you are. And I was like, okay. Went through the whole process, and like within a month, like had interviewed, did my on-campus virtual, and had a job offer. And I was just like, I solely believe that for 2 reasons, it was why I ended up here. I'm a man of faith, and so I do believe that like everything just aligned the way that it was supposed to be for me. And then also the connections that I had, people putting in a good word of mouth for me, and also being able to vouch for who I was because they had met me the year prior at a conference and got to see me, and the way that I conducted myself was able for them to speak positively on my behalf when it came time for them to do the interview process. And I just really appreciated that. And so I will say networking has definitely been a major part of like my story from start to finish. I would say start to right now, because I'm definitely not finished.
You're not finished.
Not finished, but it's definitely been a major part of my story from how I started at UCA to where I am now.
So what advice do you have, like when we think about the graduate students who, I mean, some folks are like at the beginning of a graduate program, some are ending, like, so they're all in different spaces and different, but just kind of in general, when you think about networking, what advice or strategies can you offer for graduate students?
Yes, that's a really good question. I think there's a couple. So if you're at the beginning of like graduate school, I think it's just like understanding where you get your energy from, because like sometimes people can be very exhausting. I'm an individual where I can be very exhausting for some people. And so I know that. But then other times you may find that like you are rejuvenated from being in conversation with people. And so once you know that, I think that then dictates how you choose to interact with people and where your networking comes from. And so for some of you, that may be face-to-face interactions, or for others, that may be, hey, I want to hand you my business card and then follow up via email. I want to follow up via a phone call. And there's no right or wrong way to do that as long as you are sparking that connection. I think similarly, I mentioned this earlier, but like following up and staying connected is a piece that people oftentimes forget. It's like networking is only as strong as the communication that both parties put into it. And so I'm really big on, I'm a relational type of person anyway, but like if I meet you at a conference and I feel like there's a really good spark there, both professionally, I'm like, okay, cool. Like I exchange business cards, or like, I got your email, I'm going to follow up with you afterwards because I know that conferencing season can be really busy and I don't want to kind of get lost in the clutter. So I'm going to give
Mhm.
you some time and be like, hey, like, I met you at so conference. It was so nice to meet you. Would you have time for us to connect, especially in the world of Zoom right now,
Yeah.
via Zoom, so that we can talk? And I just recently did this. I saw a colleague that in the field of orientation in New York. I have never met them in my life, but we are Facebook friends, as we know that
Uh-huh.
Facebook tends to do that.
Uh-huh.
And so I knew that they worked in orientation, and I was intrigued by like just their progression of their professional
Mhm.
career. And
Right.
so I sent them a Facebook Messenger message, and I was like, hey, we've been friends on Facebook for some time now, not quite sure when, but I saw that you posted a position that you're hiring in your office. And although I am not interested in applying for this position, I am intrigued by your progression in the field and would love to pick your
Mhm.
brain. Please let me know if you have some time to do so. And I think, again, that's an important thing to be mindful of. Is like, you have to be okay with sticking yourself out there,
Mhm.
and rejection or being left on red may happen, but also getting a response may happen too. And I got a
Right. Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
I got a response. And they were like, I would love to do this. And we set up a meeting. It was via Zoom and we talked, and
Mhm.
it was phenomenal. So again, just keeping in mind, like, those connections can be really important in how you follow up with people. Similarly, with the fact of like, we all know that we're going to be asking people for letters of recommendation and things like that, right? So though I have my staple people that I always ask for letters of recommendation, and I think it's important that you keep in mind, are you still regularly communicating with them? Do they know
Mhm.
how to speak to your strengths and weaknesses? Because like, you don't just want someone to speak to your strengths, they should also be aware of your weaknesses, or how you have developed through those
Mhm.
weaknesses to make them strong points and lessons learned. And so I am very intentional about making sure that I check in with old professors from UCA and being like, hey, this is what I'm up to now. I send about twice a semester, like, email to all the people that I keep in touch with that have been a part of my academic journey, of just letting
Mhm.
them know. And it's a very lengthy email, but
Yeah.
I go over like what's going on personally in my life, and I also go
Mhm.
on what's happening professionally in my life, because I've developed that relationship with them over time. I think for those that are like towards the end of your graduate career, is shoot your shot. Like, like, we hear this all the time, but like, for real, shoot your shot. What is the worst that can happen? Like, for real, they don't respond.
Mhm.
Okay, like, they don't respond. Like, whatever. But like, what if they do respond? You don't know who is on the other side of a job opportunity for you.
Yeah. And a
You
lot of
don't.
times the people on the other side are just as excited. Like if
Yes.
somebody reaches out to me and is like, recognizes me in the field and wants to learn from me, wants some tips from me, I'm honored. So of
Yes.
course that makes me feel good too. So,
Yes.
it goes both ways.
It really does. Like, and I think the feeling is like so exciting for both parties, because it's just like, you remembered me. That's really exciting. And
Yeah.
also, like, I'm so glad that we are keeping up this connection, because you don't really know how that will continue to develop. And
Mhm.
so, again, just shoot your shot. That's really exciting to do. And like, my last thing, to be honest, is like, I've not always been this bold and outgoing. It's
Mhm.
definitely taken time, but I appreciate the people in my life, both professional mentors and personal in my life, that have always told me that, like, you will never get anywhere without speaking it to existence or telling someone what you need, right? So
Mhm.
like, people don't know what you need unless you ask for help. And so
Right.
I think that's very important, is like, if you don't know how to network, or you don't know where to begin, ask. Attend
Yeah.
the webinar, listen to the podcast, do some research, because
uh,
there's people out here, we want you to be successful. Like, no one wants you to fail. No one at UCA does, because, baby girl, we out here, okay? UCA alums, we are amazing. And we want you to thrive and be successful and get the most out of your collegiate experience, both while you're still here and beyond. As they always say, go here, go anywhere. And so
mhm.
I truly believe in that. But again, if you are quiet about the experiences that you want, or quiet about being like, oh my gosh, I really would have wished I said something, no one can
Uh-huh.
help you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm reminded that I don't know, I sat through one year I had to sit through like 3 or 4 graduations within a 3-week period. And so I was sitting there, like through these different ceremonies, crafting my own commencement speech, because one day I'm going to be a commencement speaker somewhere, so I was crafting my
Oh, you
commencement
better
speech.
speak it into existence.
Exactly. And so my theme was it started off, it was going to be dream big and go live the dream. But then what I realized is that a lot of us, we don't really, we don't even know all the possibilities. And so it's not really about dreaming big. For some of us, it's about dreaming just a little bit bigger, just a little bit bigger than what we thought. And in doing that, we begin to take steps that take us down a path that's just a phenomenal path. And you don't know where you're going, but you just know it's wonderful. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking about like the role of networking in that process of just dreaming a little bit bigger and thinking a little bit bigger, because you can have a little bit bigger impact on the world, around you. And so networking plays a huge part of that, because sometimes networking is about finding out what the possibilities are. Like there's different purposes to that networking. So nice. Well, you've given us a lot of good advice. I want to pause and see if we can get some questions from our audience.
Okay, let's do it.
Looks like we've got one. Let's see. So here's a good question. It says, any tips on networking for graduate students that are studying online only? So if you're that online only student, what are your networking tips? That's a good question.
I would say you have nothing to lose. You truly have nothing to lose. I here's some tips that I would definitely say. So with emailing nowadays, please change your profile picture. Don't just have it be like a random bubble or your initials. Go ahead and actually upload a professional headshot so that people can see who you're emailing. That will go such a long way. And then with that, you are shooting your shot always, because you are online only. And so making sure that your email etiquette is up to par, making sure that your grammar is up to par is so important. People do look at those things and it does matter. But also, if that's not a strong point of yours, you can say in your first email, hey, Ty, this is so-and-so. I attended the webinar on this day, and I was wondering if you would have some time to talk via Zoom so that I can get to know you better. You can go ahead and initially be like, I want to connect this way, instead of being like, I want to converse back and forth via email, if you know that that's not a strong suit of yours. And that is totally fine. The ball is literally in your court. And so what you choose to do with it is your own journey. I will say that you do have to be a little bit more brave and outgoing, because you are online only in that capacity. And so understanding that you are working through the internet and you're working through another barrier, quote, being that in this day and age with COVID is, and everyone's Zooming, everyone's spending a lot of time on their computer. And so they may not be wanting to respond to an email after 5:01 p.m. And so being courteous and being mindful of whenever you send your emails to connect with someone is also important. I find that oftentimes if you send me an email during lunch, it's actually a really great time. Will I check it? Absolutely not. But when I come back to the office at 1 o'clock, I do check my emails from the most recent sent or the latest sent, and then catch back up. And so just being strategic in how you choose to operate may be very, very helpful in that matter. And so those are some tidbits that I would have for you if you're online. The last thing that I would say is also keeping in mind that just because you're online doesn't mean that you have any less of a shot than someone who is in person, because people in person can also be let down or shut down just as easily. And so don't think of it as like, oh, I shouldn't try because they may not check it, this, that, and the other. And you also have to kind of change your perspective on the timeliness of whenever you get a response back, because life does happen. And so you may not always see the person that you're wanting to connect with in person, right? Because you are in an online capacity, but you do have to then be a little bit more understanding of being like, maybe I should allow 24 to 48 hours instead of to get a response within 24 hours, or being aware that if I send an email on Friday, I should not be expecting an email until maybe Monday or Tuesday at the latest. And so these are things that I think is good for all people, not just online, but in person as well, to be mindful of, because sometimes we get lost in the expectancy of people replying to us or the neediness, and we forget that like we're all human and we all have lives outside of just our 8 to 5.
Yes. Yes, and that is something that, like, as a faculty member, I was less aware of those types of time boundaries than I am now as a dean. So, like, as a faculty member, I didn't think anything about shooting off emails to students on Saturday morning or Sunday afternoon, and it didn't occur to me that it was freaking them out, you know.
Yeah.
And but it was a different time, and now, you know, I'm much, and so I use, like, in my email, I'll go ahead and write the email on a Saturday afternoon if that's what I'm thinking about at that moment, but I will schedule it to go out on Monday at 8 o'clock. So
Yes.
I'm using my tools to be mindful of other people and to respect their time. But that's what works for me, is to go ahead and write the email when I'm thinking about it, and I use my send later feature in my email. So, you know, old people can learn. See?
And we love it, like, for real. Like, that is such a wonderful feature that helps, because I'm similar to you. Like, if I see an email, oftentimes I want to just go ahead and respond to it, but like I also try to respect my work-life balance and be thinking of others. Something that a colleague did that I really appreciated last semester was that they have a family, a partner, and like they were just really busy, and so they were working non-traditional, and I use air quotes because I feel like really right now everybody's working non-traditional
Right.
hours. Like right now
Yeah.
we're just working whenever we can get the work done.
Uh-huh.
And in their email signature they said, thanks for being understanding of whenever you got this email. Please feel no pressure to respond at whatever. This is just whenever it works for me. And it was
Uh-huh.
like really crafty language of basically saying, hey, I see your email and I'm responding to your email at this time, but do not feel any pressure to respond back to me. This is just when it works for me. And
Mhm.
here you go. And I really love that, because I remember getting an email from them at like 1:13 in the morning.
Yeah.
And then like, I never said anything about it, but then like it came up the next week in a staff meeting and they were like, yeah, like I finally got the kids to sleep. Husband was
Mhm.
down for the count and I was able to get some work done. And I was like, yep,
Right.
that makes perfect sense.
I'm not going to worry about you now.
Exactly.
So I'll go ahead and ask you if are there any other additional ideas that you'd like to share with us at this time?
I do have one. So I would say when it comes to networking, it's being mindful of the space that you walk into and how you present. So I think for me, over the time, I've had to be intentionally aware. So like I said, I identify as a Black queer man, and I know that
Mhm.
sometimes in spaces, I can be very intimidating. I mean, even
Mhm.
now, just with my hair, like my hair is locked for those that can't see. And
Mhm.
so I used to have very natural hair, still have natural hair, it's just in a different appearance, I guess you
Uh-huh.
could say. So how I show up to spaces matters. And I don't say that lightly to mean like, oh, you should be like overly cautious, but I do mean self-awareness is very helpful whenever
Mhm.
it comes to networking. And so making sure that when I show up to spaces where maybe I am not in the majority, or I'm not around people that either look like me or have salient identities that I share, that I
Mhm.
am being aware enough to be like, hi. And if it is beneficial to me to then say, you know, my name is Ty, and I know that you have research in this specific area. I identify as this part of the community, and I was wondering if we could set up a time to do coffee because I'm interested in what you have to say, right? So, like,
Mhm.
sometimes it may be beneficial for you to divulge to that person that you're interested in connecting with about some
Mhm.
identities that they can and cannot see.
Mhm.
Similarly, understanding that oftentimes you may have identities that everyone can see. And so you may feel a little bit differently about wanting to go and connect with them. But I would say like the one thing that will stop you every time is the doubt and unbelief that you have in yourself. Because
Mhm.
I remember on several occasions being afraid of how I was going to be viewed or what I would be thought of. and that stopped me from stepping out to make a connection. And then either a later time came or someone came along and they were like, hey, like, do you know so and so? And it was really awkward when I was like, no, but like I did have the time to introduce them or meet them, but I didn't. And they were like, why? And then I ended up meeting that person, and they were like, I wish you would have said something like, you're phenomenal and I really wanted to get to know you, or I had this incredible opportunity that like I would have loved to share with you. And so don't count yourself out before someone else does. And that can be really hard to hear, but I take that from my own experience. I'm someone that likes to learn from other people's mistakes instead of my own mistakes. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna learn from them and I'm not gonna do that. And so if nothing else, don't count yourself out before someone else does, because you're always going to be your biggest hero, but you'll also be the one person that's stopping you, and you don't want to be that person.
Nice. Well, Ty, I really want to thank you for spending some time with me today and sharing your insights into the role of networking.
Yes, it has been wonderful. I really appreciate you having me here. And I mean, I clearly love this. Like I've been lighting up and smiling the whole time from cheek to cheek, but it has definitely been beautiful. And I hope that people who have been listening and tuned in are able to actually take away something, if not all, because I know that sometimes not everything is applicable, but if something really stuck out for you, I hope that you're able to hone in on that and make it your own experience and craft it for you so that it works the best for you and your experience going forward.
Very nice. Ty, you are just wonderful with words. Like you should have a podcast. It should be Grad Chats with Ty. I mean, you give me a run for my money.
Oh, you're so kind.
Well, let me wrap this up. I want to thank our folks in the audience. Like I said at the beginning, this was a super chat. So we've got people in the audience. So I want to thank you all for taking time out to be with us this evening and learn about networking and hear from Ty. I also want to thank our listeners who are listening in to this episode of Grad Chats with Dr. B. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and listen to future episodes.